Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today, I've got someone who is a serial entrepreneur, a supporter of young and emerging companies, someone who's focused on social responsibility, and someone who is involved in a very interesting space. So before I bring him on, I want to just thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining us today. And I want to let you know that I think one of your most important assets is your origin story. And if you're interested in finding out why I think that for you as a leader, for you, someone who's trying to influence people, sales, anything like that, come to executivespeakingsuccess.com, go into the blog, and you will find some things about your superhero origin story that can help you hone that. And if you ever want some personalized attention, I'd love to invite you to join one of my cohort-based courses. You can find all of them at ed.executivespeakingsuccess.com. And now let me introduce David Lucatch. He is the CEO of Liquid Avatar Technologies. And as I said, he's a serial entrepreneur, a supporter of young and emerging companies. He's focused on social responsibility, and he's involved in the world of cryptocurrency and NFTs and online digital identities. And there's all kinds of really exciting, interesting things that are going on in that world that I think are just absolutely crucial for people to start paying attention to now. So welcome, David. It's really great to have you.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
So let's first start, because this is Speak Like a Leader after all, and you have been a serial entrepreneur, been involved in a number of companies, have a track record as a leader, I think is fair to say. So let me just ask you straight up, like, who was one of your biggest influences in your leadership? Who's somebody that gave you something that you could share with us that has contributed to your success?
Well, I think I can probably identify, if you don't mind, three people, or
don't mind at all.
And one is a duo. So the first one is a name that most people won't recognize, and I'm in the Toronto area, so I'm in Canada. And although I spend most of my time pre-COVID traveling, especially into the U.S., a gentleman by the name of David Bloom, who's no longer with us. David was the CEO of Shoppers Drug Mart in Canada, and Shoppers Drug Mart is like CVS or Rite Aid, is the largest drug chain in Canada. And I got an opportunity to meet David through one of his family members. And David taught me a lot about leadership, about how to run an organization and treat people like you'd want to be treated, and which was always part of my early mantra anyways. And so he was phenomenal. The second person I can look to and lately, unfortunately, his persona has been very controversial. And again, being north of the border, I won't engage in any politics, but Rudolph Giuliani, just as he was finishing as mayor of New York, I had an opportunity. I was supporting a large organization and had helped them raise a lot of capital for their nonprofit. And they as a thank you, they introduced me to Rudolph Giuliani. I got a short one-on-one amount of time with him, and I asked him what makes a great leader. That was the question I had for him. And he said to me, make a decision. And I thought that was very prolific, because during the crisis of 9/11, he had to make lots of decisions. Yeah. And some of them put a lot of people in harm's way. And so I felt that was a very important piece of advice. And they followed up with saying that, you could always change your mind, but if you make no decision while it is a decision, it gets you nowhere. So that was really important. And then the last two that I mentioned is and it's going to be interesting, but I had an opportunity, and I wasn't a fan of their music as a youngster, but as a young person. But Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. I'm sorry, I'm getting the names put together. So I spent a lot of time with Gene and Paul, working with them on a couple projects, and I found that amazing salt of the earth individuals. Gene and Paul are just amazing people. They support so many great organizations, and while their personalities to a great extent are larger than life, They
Yeah.
were very humbled and down to earth, and really treated people well. And so really what I took away from that is start by treating people the way you want to be treated,
Hmm.
and make decisions, and don't be afraid of the decisions you make, but be flexible and open to take a criticism might be an over extension of that, but take input, and be able to turn, because the map goes in very, very many different directions to get to the same destination.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley of Kiss.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah, I've heard good things about Gene Simmons, and his persona is definitely all scary and larger than life. But apparently he is a really great guy. That's cool. Well, so I think that that's all great stuff, and clearly it has contributed to your success. Yeah.
I would think so. I mean, my family beginnings are very, very, very humble. My parents were both effectively blue collar workers, and my dad drove a cab. My mom was a bookkeeper, so my mom was white
Uh-huh.
collar. But so I didn't have an opportunity to meet some really great people growing up. But as I entered my career and started moving forward, I've had some remarkable opportunities, whether it's been Gene and Paul, or Stan Lee, or other people that have just they've left a mark on me because they've been such outstanding individuals. And if you don't take the time to learn from these people, it really is quite sad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's such an opportunity, right? It's one of the
Hmm.
things that really sets us apart is our ability to learn from each
Hmm.
other. I think there's a saying somewhere, I got to go find it, but the cool thing about being human is you can live multiple lives in one lifetime
Hmm.
because you can learn from the experiences of others.
Right. That's very true. Very true.
Yeah. So was is there a down moment that you ever learned a really big lesson from? Like, have you ever had any major failures that taught you something?
Well, I've had an opportunity to mentor at the University of Toronto, and I've always told young people that, you can only compress the time wisdom equation so much without breaking it.
Yeah,
And
right.
And most people sort of get to the edge. If you think of a desk and get to the edge, and most people think as you travel along your business experience, that edge is kind of going to be the precipice of failure. I find that most people just don't push right to that edge. And actually, when you fall off that edge, it's usually the precipice of success. So,
Uh,
I've had a lot of what I would consider small failures, and things that I wish which in respect you wish that you'd done differently. I can give you two very quick ones. One was, I had an opportunity to spend some time with Tony Dorsett, and if you're a Cowboys fan, you'll remember that name, and the
yeah,
Heisman
yeah.
Trophy winner. And Tony really took a liking to me and was in the bottled water business. And in 2001, asked me to partner with him in the bottled water business. And I said to him, Tony, no one's ever going to buy bottled water. So yeah, that looked good on me. And then the second one was earlier than that I can think of is, um, while the U.S. moved very quickly into e-commerce, and most people don't know that Harry Potter was the impetus for that, because Scholastic offered a book early if you bought it online, and that's
Hmm.
what sort of set off e-commerce. Canada lagged behind that because our banking system in Canada is a bit different, and our banks are slow to move. And I had an opportunity in the late 90s to develop technology that allowed Canadians to shop online and create that input technology for credit cards. And we built it. It was phenomenal, and U.S. companies were soaring in valuation, and we were holding at a very low level. And people just kept telling me that no one's ever going to shop online. No one is ever going to shop online. So I think of it as a failure because I just didn't have the fortitude to stick it out,
Yeah,
and so I vowed to myself, that I'm always going to make mistakes. Just try not to make the same one twice,
yeah,
and that as we got into digital identity, and so the DeFi arena, and this emergence of the NFT market, that we were going to stand fast, and really move forward in a way that we believed was the right way, and we've been seeing what I believe is early stage success based on that. So I don't think it's got to be a catastrophic failure, but I think it's got to be something and a lesson that you can learn something from and take that learning and move forward.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think failure is maybe the wrong word, even, right? It's just a
Mhm.
learning opportunity, and
Yeah.
it's not failure till you say you're done.
And I give up, right?
Yeah.
And my gaming handle is Bulldog. I'm small, built low to the ground, but I am tenacious.
Right on. Well, you just said a mouthful of things. So there's DeFi, right? Which is not defying. It's not DEFY. It's
Right,
DEFI, which is decentralized finance. And then you
right,
said NFTs, which is non-fungible tokens, which is like,
right.
what even is that, right? So maybe that's a good, leap into the world that you now inhabit. And you know, one of the things that I hear in what you say and from our conversations that we've had is that you are somebody who is typically early into things like this.
Hmm.
And I think that it's when we're recording this right now, it's September 22nd, 2021, and the cover of The Economist this week is a picture of Alice in Wonderland, and it's like, down the rabbit hole of
Hmm.
decentralized finance and cryptocurrency and NFTs, which stands for non-fungible tokens. We can talk about that, what all that is, but that's all very much tied to this world of digital identity and digital scarcity, which is like, what is digital scarcity? How is that even possible? So that's the world that you're inhabiting now. I would love to just hear a little bit about
Hmm.
what you're seeing. Maybe we can set a context for people about some of the key fundamentals of this world. And then I'd love to hear where you think the movement is, what the direction is, what people should be paying attention to now.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, of course. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
a lot to unpack. But I'll tell you where we put a stake in the ground 4 years ago, approximately 4 years ago.
Uh,
We were looking at a number of projects, and we realized one of the things I like to use is Homer Simpson looks for donuts, and I look for holes, right?
yeah.
So although as a good Canadian, I do love a donut, especially a maple donut. Um,
Yeah.
so so we put a stake in the ground that when it came to digital identity,
Uh-huh.
and we felt that was the basis in which all other digital products would emerge. So how do I take my conventional identity and move it into something secure that I can control? And the European government sort of helped with that as they developed something called GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation,
Yeah.
and North America followed suit, and California has the California Consumer Protection Act, and there's a number of states that are now involved in that. But at the end of the day, it said consumers really own their data. So data is really effectively the new gold, because
Yeah.
if consumer owns the data, that is sort of an endless well of opportunity for companies to engage with me as a consumer and pay me or give me value for use of my data.
Yeah.
And so if I own my data and I own control over my digital persona, then that opens up the opportunity to decentralize other opportunities, because they need to be controlled by the user and the individual, not the corporation. So you start seeing new opportunities for cryptocurrencies and other derivatives and decentralized financing, all that based on the fact that the consumer is at no longer at the end of a spoke, but is in fact the hub. The corporation is no longer the
Yeah.
hub, but the consumer is the hub. And where we've been used to for hundreds of years, corporations sort of at the center of a hub and spoke system, and a consumer out at the end point. Now the consumer is at the hub, and all these touch points are at the end of the spokes.
Yeah.
So decentralized finance is emerging, I mean, at an expedited rate, but it really is starting more so in the European market and coming to North America, rather than North America driving it and sending it to Europe. And even with the emergence of things like cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens, you're seeing off North American shore being the biggest area of influence, even though a lot of it is driven by North American companies. So we also have to look, when we take into account all of this, and while I'm not a lawyer, can't give advice, and nor would I do so. You've got to look at the 1933-34 Securities Act, and in the U.S. And I personally, I think that's a bit of Jenga, right? Like everything just keeps stacking on top of it. But, and then it's hard to keep adding on to something that was built before electronic trading even came into play. So
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of influence with decentralized identifiers, which is called a DID, for individuals to be able to control their digital identity. Then you're seeing decentralized finance kind of saying, well, the consumer is now in control. Let's give them control of the opportunity and no longer just corporate control. And then you're seeing the emergence of digital collectibles or NFTs.
So let's talk about. I mean, there's a lot there. I want to talk about all of it, but just because we've been saying NFT, 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 and I think everybody's hearing NFT, NFT, NFT. Let's talk about NFTs and what, like, I was just having dinner with one of my best friends last night, and this subject came up, and I talked about the fact that it was on the cover of The Economist, and and he's like, I just don't get NFTs. I really don't get that yet. What would you say to that person?
Well, I would ask them if they've ever collected baseball cards and
Yeah.
if they ever collected comic books, and everybody likes to sort of troll me online after they look over my shoulder and see some of my collectibles. But
Yeah.
did we ever collect something physical, right? And
Yeah.
and whether it was stamps, coins, anything, the fact is I have to keep them in a physical space.
Right.
Right? And so those physical collectibles, eventually I get rid of, and that's where scarcity comes into play.
Right.
But what if I could tell you that you could take all those physical collectibles and now make them digital? You could limit the numbers, and instead of maybe condition of a product. So if you're a baseball card collector or a comic book collector, you know that condition has input into the value equation, but maybe it's the commonality of the product rather than the condition. So an example of that would be, I'll give you 5 different images of the same baseball card.
Right.
One, I'll put out 1,000 of those digital images. One, I'll put 500, one 250, one 100, and 150, just a 50 alone.
Yeah.
And depending on demand, the rarity of that card may drive value. So it's taking all of my collectibles that I would carry in boxes and putting them on my digital device.
Right.
And now I can carry them wherever I go, and I can share them with others. And depending on scarcity, depending on other factors, supply and demand, all these things will drive price. And that's pretty much the same with any collectible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So what that fundamentally means is this is the ability to have digital scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
And what was kind of cool about digital at first is that there was no scarcity. I mean, like you could just replicate it as many times as you wanted. It was all that, but that makes it hard to have collectibles, huh?
Well, we've solved that problem, especially during the pandemic. I mean, we took a company public. Liquid Avatar Technologies is a small Canadian company, also traded on the OTC markets. When we took the company public, it wasn't my first foray into the public market, but I had never taken a company public remotely. I never even had to see our lawyers. Everything was DocuSigned. So we've been used to, anyone who's ever used HelloSign or DocuSign or any of those, or PDF signatures, is used to authentication of a digital product. So we're not really taking this massive leap. It's just you've got to sort of shed the traditional thought process and say, okay, well, what can I do digitally that I can also do physically, and what value do I get out of doing it digitally? And maybe it's not the same value, but it's a different value, and I can measure that value.
Yeah. So what do you think it means for like larger corporations, like I mean, is there what do you think that they should be paying attention to? And it kind of sounds to me like one thing is just this idea of digital identity, and what is that going to mean, and the fact that the consumers at the hub now versus them, the corporation, that sounds like something that is important to get underneath and start to understand and prepare for and work towards. And then the fact that so much of this stuff is happening digitally. And it is interesting. I like the comparison of going public remotely and using DocuSign. Um, that's that's a very, very real part of life right now as we are doing it. That is maybe one of the peaks of the mountains of this terrain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how about flipping it over to Bitcoin and Ethereum and the whole world of cryptocurrencies?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think what is your advice for organizations now? Like, David, should I go start accepting Bitcoin for my online course? Should I, what should I be thinking about, or what should companies in general? What's a good overview on cryptocurrency and how that's impacting things?
And again, I'll be careful to say that everybody should do their
Yeah.
own due diligence, because that's
Yes.
really
Yeah. You're
important.
not a lawyer. Yeah.
And I can't. But here's the situation. First of all, the our accounting industry, CPAs
Mm-hmm.
and in Canada CPAs, CAs and beyond, um, they're having a difficult time embracing cryptocurrency on the books.
Right.
So so that has to be adopted and changed. But it is, you're seeing a lot more companies and organizations and just each individuals hedging their investments by getting involved in the cryptocurrency industry. And so I think it's as I got really great advice many years ago, it's all about crawl, walk, run, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. There
Right.
you go.
Get involved. Should you take, individually, John, should you take crypto for your courses? If it means you're going to get more participants in your courses and your risk on crypto is, it's kind of that intersection between,
Yeah.
increased attendance and risk. If you
Yeah.
can, if you can tolerate that, then the answer
Yeah.
should be yes.
Yeah.
But what is the impact going to be for you if you start getting involved in crypto? And then every company has to answer that.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the step-ins for crypto is obviously NFTs for a lot of companies,
Uh-huh.
and so if you're a company that's used to putting out cereal box premiums,
Uh-huh.
and we all remember those, the toys that we got in the bottom of a box of cereal, then
Mhm.
could you give them out as NFTs?
Yeah.
Could you do something that's branded, excuse me, branded as a digital collectible? Can you start using smart contracts to move some of in your supply chain activity? So it doesn't have to be
Hmm.
just, we think of cryptocurrencies, but it's really the underpinning technology, whether it's digital identity, NFTs, crypto, is all underpinned by blockchain technology. So
Yeah.
how is blockchain technology going to work for you in the real world? Not, and then if that works for you in the real world, what layers on top? What is the outward facing items? Whether it is digital credentials, is it NFTs, is it cryptocurrency?
Yeah. Well, it certainly is. I think I feel a little bit like a lot of people felt when I was just stepping into the internet, and because I was just there from what felt like the beginning, it was all kind of second nature to me. And everybody else around me was like, "What are you talking about?" Um, so so let's see. There seems to be a tension between centralized finance and decentralized finance,
Mhm.
and it seems like that tension maybe is not just in that particular thing, but it seems like there is kind of a tug of war right now between centralized and decentralized, kind of in a lot of places. Is that something that you see?
Yeah, and so here's the challenge, and we
Mm,
see this constantly, right? We see it constantly. If you decentralize too fast and you don't put the right safeguards in place, you effectively allow bad actors into the mix,
yeah.
right? Because decentralization partly works on the premise that everyone is good. Um,
Uh-huh.
um, I always get in trouble when I use family references, but when my daughter, who is is a young adult, was little, she said, "I love everyone in the world except strangers." Right? So if you think about that, that is a very circular argument. So
Yeah.
and so when you think about decentralized finance and decentralization. So let me give an example of NFTs, and we've already referenced that this is late September. But
Yeah.
less than a week ago, at one of the most prolific exchanges for NFTs online, OpenSea made a public statement that one of their chief product officers, or the chief product officer, I believe it was trading ahead of the market, basically front running. They were taking stuff that wasn't in the market yet, buying it, then putting it up on the front page and reselling it for a profit. So they were basically inside trade frame running, whatever you want to call it. And
Uh-huh.
so there's been so many bad actors in some of these decentralized activities. Like in we belong to organizations for digital identity that focus on effectively private blockchains, not public blockchains. So those that can't get into it without authorization, because if I'm going to verify that you are who you say you are in decentralized identity,
Mhm.
or digital identity, I have to ensure that I put the safeguards in to make sure you're not someone who you aren't.
Yeah.
And to do that, there's a lot of control. So even though it's decentralized, it doesn't have centralized control factors.
Uh-huh.
We're not there yet with artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence, now we throw another piece into the mix. AI will help support, DeFi, crypto, blockchain, everything else, but it's just not at a level there where you can do it. And the last thing I want to say about this, and I know it's a long
No,
um,
it's great. Yeah.
answer, but centralized technologies or centralized operations create walled gardens and barriers to entry, which have been one of the biggest opportunities for profit.
Hmm.
So if you take that away, you now say to corporations, you've got to compete on an even basis with a startup that happened last week who doesn't have the infrastructure you do. And that's why we see all these challenger banks.
Hmm.
They don't have millions and billions of dollars of infrastructure, and they can compete as effectively because of the decentralized nature of the business. So it creates open standards, open community, open source, which can actually hamper growth for some organizations because there's no profitability.
So, so there is a lot of pushback on the whole
Mm-hmm.
decentralized finance, and it does seem to present something that feels like a big threat to a lot of the centralized, especially financial
Yep.
organizations. So I think that's a really interesting thing to keep in mind as I look at the headlines and the
Mm-hmm.
articles and what people are saying, to understand that there is this real tension between centralized and decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the other things about this decentralized movement is, as you alluded to and what you just said, it's taking a huge amount of control and profits and all that other kind of stuff, leverage, away from centralized actors, and creating exchanges that aren't run by one entity. And so there's a lot of upsides to that, I think, and there are also a lot of threats to the way things are,
Yep.
right?
Yep. I was going to just say, if you think about the automotive industry,
Uh-huh.
how many years did they fight? And I'm not saying that they didn't try it, but how many years did they fight electric vehicles? I mean, companies that were leading edge companies that spent 10 years developing batteries, were out of business because the organizations around them just would not adopt.
Yeah.
And then you have these um, innovators, these DeFi people, these people who are disruptors, like Elon Musk saying enough is enough.
Yeah.
And you get enough of a movement behind them, and you sort of decentralize the space race, you decentralize the automotive industry, you start decentralizing or disrupting these industries,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, it's the same with identity and privacy, where the California Consumer Protection Act, invoked all these restrictions on corporations, and the biggest names that you can think of in social media and
Yeah.
computer and telephone manufacturing, and all of a sudden they're now saying, well, we're here to protect you, but they're the ones that were breaching privacy for so many years,
Right.
right? So their take on it is they've not only got on the boat, that they're the big flag wavers, because they know to survive they've got to change their stripes.
Yeah.
So and that's a good thing for everyone. But I still will recommend that if you're going to go to a wallet, a digital wallet, and it has a name in front of it, with a piece of fruit or a robot, then it's not your wallet, it's their wallet,
Right.
right? It can't be your wallet if it's got their name on it.
Right.
So ideally, we're still not at the point where we're fully embracing decentralization, DeFi, but we're making great strides to get there.
Yeah. It's all so interesting. And I think it's just, yeah, we're still at that place where I think it is very confusing unless you're
Mm-hmm.
just a native to that, or you've really immersed in that. There's something that we hear, I think, in this realm: trusted but trustless.
Mm-hmm.
Can you break that out for us?
It's oh boy.
Is that a tough
So
one?
yeah, it's kind of, so a DocuSign is trusted and trustless. Nobody saw you sign something, right?
Right.
So there's no trust, but you trust the system. Now I don't
Yeah.
know if everyone will agree with that explanation, but it's the simplest one I can give you. When we think about, so let me give you another example that we use all the time, which makes sense.
Um,
John walks into a store and buys groceries.
hmm.
Now John gets to the cash register and John decides to use a card, a debit card or a credit card, right?
Uh-huh.
You tap, swipe, insert, whatever you do to get that information into the system. All of a sudden, John is the card holder. The merchant, the grocery store, is trying to verify that card, and the bank that issued that card is the issuer. And you're
Yeah.
creating this triangle. It's called a trust triangle between the three parties, between the
Yeah.
holder, the verifier, and the issuer. And to some extent, it's both trust and trustless, because at the end of the day, that transaction, if John has the deemed value in his account, is going to be approved if the issuer and merchant believe that John is who he says he is,
Hmm.
and he can either provide a PIN or a signature, and that's accepted trust
Right.
without any real proof.
Yeah.
Digital identity can work the same way, where John can go in, show his digital driver's license or his COVID vaccination credential or some other test credential on his phone, and the system can check that credential. It's not just a copy of a paper record or an email. It can
Hmm.
check that record to make sure John belongs to John, right? Because
Hmm.
he wants to get into a stadium. And at the same time, the system, instead of, can ask for a PIN, or John can take an image of his face, and it connects to a biometric database and says, "Yep, that's John," and we're done. So it's trusted and trustless at the same time, because I'm not saying that John needs to be in front of the bank to get the bank to give him money, and he doesn't have to be in front of the merchant to give them that money. Everybody's agreeing in that principle, that there's trust and trustless activities going on at the same time.
Yeah. And digital identifiers are decentralizing that and making that much easier online,
Mm-hmm.
because online, that's one of the other things about online, right? Like, it was, on the internet, nobody knows you're actually a dog, right?
Right, the old meme, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but with digital identifiers, we can get that trust that someone is who they say they are, but it's not because of a big centralized database that knows everything about everybody all the time.
Right.
It's a decentralized identifier, but it's something that is trustworthy.
I'm holding the data. I'm managing and controlling that data.
Yeah.
And while it seems esoteric to many people, I'm going to use two online examples that will make sense. One is
Right.
is we all use credit cards online, or mostly credit
Yeah.
cards online.
Yeah.
And the banks say, don't worry if someone takes your card number, we got you covered. But that is globally, I think that's a $28.5 billion issue around the world.
Whoa.
Okay, that's, I think, the number that was reported, 2019 or 2020. So let's say it's just under $30 billion. So somebody's got to eat it, and I'm
Yeah.
sure the networks aren't eating it, so they're probably passing it along in recovery of fees and interest rates
Yeah,
and
of
everything else.
course. Yeah.
So what if when John uses his credit card and it's over a certain amount, the system pings John and asks him to answer with his face to make sure that that digital credential for your face is on file,
Uh-huh.
right? It's not your picture; it's a facial mapping that you're
Right.
using to move a credential.
Right.
And what if now here's the big one I think is a huge one. What if John wanted to sign into a website and they presented John with a QR code? John scans the QR code, and that doesn't deliver a result. It only starts a transaction, and again, it asks John to confirm that it passes a credential electronically, and asks John to enter a PIN or take a image of his face or his fingerprint, and it lets you in the website. You've never had to remember another username or password.
Mm.
So think about the convenience. Forget the security and the safety. Just think about the convenience of all the passwords and the usernames that you have to remember. And think about all the companies that every time they update the passwords to their employees, how many problems they have. So these are real world problems that can be so easily solved by digital credentials.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're heading there, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
is definitely the direction of things. So, David, I know we're coming up on our time here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else? Two angles on this. The first is there anything else that you think is really important for us to just talk about for a minute in this world of digital identity and NFTs and cryptocurrency and this whole brave new world that's roaring in on us?
Well, I think the first thing I'll say is embrace change. This is happening. It's
Mm,
not a choice. It's happening, and
yeah.
and uh, unfortunately, COVID has accelerated this. So we're all going to have some type of digital identity. So
Mm,
so try and figure out what works best for you, and make sure that you remain in control of your individual identity and data. Don't give control to a third party or a third party wallet. Make sure that you're using a wallet that you can control. I,
mm,
I think the other thing to keep in mind is that you know um, uh, a lot of newspapers thought the internet was a fad. The yellow pages
yeah.
thought the
Yeah.
internet was a
Right.
fad.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so this isn't a
Yeah.
fad. So
Yeah.
be smart about it. Just embrace it, but be smart about it. That's the advice I'd give when it comes to digital identity, decentralized finance. If you're comfortable in using an investment advisor, and I've been in the internet since it started, I still use a travel agent. I don't
Yeah.
book my
Uh-huh.
own travel because I know if I
Yeah.
run to when things are normalized, I'm in the air all the time. I want to
Yeah.
know that I have somebody I can rely on if something goes
Yeah.
wrong. So
Yeah.
don't cut all the cords at once. You
Right.
know, be comfortable with what you're doing and be smart about what you're doing.
Crawl, walk, run.
Exactly.
And it reminds me of the days when, the newspaper company or whatever, they had an internet strategy, right? They had a print strategy and they had an internet strategy.
Yeah.
Like internet strategy just ate everything. Like
Exactly.
they should have had an internet strategy at a different level than where they had placed it, right? Like it should have
Yeah.
been a level up. And so I guess what I'm hearing you say is that this is something similar to that. Like this is
Very
happening.
similar.
It's not like we have our regular currency strategy and our cryptocurrency strategy and our NFTs. It's like, how is all of this? What does the business look like in a world where this is all of it, right?
Well, what I would say is well, we all shop online in some form or another, and when I say we all, children don't shop online, but digital identity is addressable to 100% of the online market.
Yeah.
So children who are educated online, children who have certain services online, children who have government supported healthcare or
Hmm.
any information, parents will have to manage that. I mean, that,
Yeah.
that goes without saying. But but digital identity is addressable to 100% of the online market, and that's
Yeah.
over 5 billion people in North America alone, over 320 million people. So it's happening.
Yeah.
It's not a fad. It's happening. It's going to be bigger than the internet itself because
Yeah.
yeah, because it's just everybody's going to need to embrace it. It's not about chips in your body. It's about control
Yeah.
of your identity and data. That's all it is. And so whether it's AR glasses, whether it's VR, whether it's internet, whether it's any data services, just make sure you're smart and in control. But But I agree with what you're saying.
So I think really important, and this has been something that's coming for a long time, but I think that just the preponderance of online activity now and the kick in the pants forward we got from COVID, I do feel like, especially digital identity. I mean, I remember when DocuSign was a rarity and now it's an everyday occurrence,
Absolutely.
And so I fully agree with you on that. I just think that's something that's pretty much now crawl, walk, run. But, and then how about in the world of leadership and communication and, being an entrepreneur and everything? Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have, or is there any, great story you want to leave us with in that realm?
Wow. Well, I can tell you, I'm learning every day. Every day I'm learning, and you know, and I only remember this story because I was in my going away suit that I used for my wedding for another purpose, right? Because you don't want to just wear it once, and so it had to be just almost 35 years ago,
um,
and somebody asked me what makes a good entrepreneur, and I think it would be the same for leadership. And I said back then, and I still believe it today: surround yourself with people that know more than you do, embrace the opportunity, and learn from them. You don't know everything, you can't know everything, and you're sometimes we'll be the smartest guys in the room or gals in the room, but often we won't be. And listen and learn. Don't just hear, listen.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous advice. And I love that. Don't just hear, listen. Fabulous, David. Well, listen, I hope that you'll keep in touch and let me
Absolutely.
know how things are going. And maybe we can revisit this topic again in a little while and see how much has changed. I do really appreciate you surfacing this on our radar and sharing your expertise in it. And I also appreciate uh, everything that you shared about leadership and business. And I wish you the very, very best. And I really appreciate you joining us today on Speak Like a Leader Show.
Well, it was a real pleasure, John, and I wish you the same.
Thank you. All right. And thanks to you for joining us on Speak Like a Leader Show. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you're thinking about how this is going to impact you personally and professionally in your business. And I will look forward to seeing you next time or hearing you next time on Speak Like a Leader Show.
Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.